Okay, so for today's practice page, you're working with decimals and fractions. The top part, they've given you a number line and they've labeled some of the parts for you. So I want you to look at these big bolded lines here. These are going to represent 10. Okay, so if we were to count 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, and then one whole. These little tiny blocks in between are going to be worth 1. So if we were to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So think of the big black lines as 10s, and these little boxes in between are going to be worth 1. So I'm going to go ahead and label those for us. So we said this line here would be 30, which we would write as 3/10. This line in here would be 40, which would be 4/10. The line in between here would be 50, which would be 5/10. Then we have this line here would be 60, which would be 6/10. My line here would be 70, so I'm writing 7/10. Then my next line would be 80. Oh, look, they have a blue box there, so we could fill that in, 8/10. And then my last line would be 90, which would be the same as 9/10. So now we've labeled our larger black lines here. Oops, I forgot the first one. We started with 10. So this would be 1/10. Okay. Now we have the boxes in between to label this top row. So if this line here represents 1/10, we just need to count on. So we have 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So this box here, we would write 0.16 because it lands on the 16th square. Your next empty box here, we've already labeled, so you're going to have to fill that one in. And then lastly, they've already labeled 53/100ths for you. You just need to count on and figure out where this line ends. So I'm going to give you a hint. It should be 0.5 something. So you're going to have to fill in that last blank there. It should be 53 blank hundredths. So you're going to count the little boxes to figure out where that line stops. Underneath here, they've given you a fraction. So we have the fraction 3/10. And you're going to change that fraction into a decimal. The only numbers you should be using are either 3 or 10 because that's the only two numbers that are in our fraction. No other numbers can go into our decimal. So think about your decimal as if it were money. We don't have any dollars or any ones here because there's no whole number here. There's no big number in front of our fraction. So where it says 1, we're going to put a 0. We don't have any whole numbers there. Your next line, they give you a hint and it says tenths. Well, our fraction here, if we read it out loud, says 3/10. So how many tenths do we have? I'm looking at my numerator. Our top number, we have 3 of them. So my decimal would be 0.3. We could write that in another way using the same fraction. Again, I don't have any whole numbers in front here, so that's going to be a 0. Tenths. Well, we already filled in 3/10 here, and we know that our fraction is 3/10, so there are 3/10 there. That's in our numerator. Hundredths, think of as your ones place. We don't have any hundredths here, so we're just going to put a 0. So the two ways you could write this fraction would be 0.3 or 0.30. Both of those fractions, or both of those decimals, represent this fraction of 3/10. Let's go over to letter B. Okay, this time we have 2 and 23/100ths. So let's start with our ones. Our ones are our big numbers. So we have a big number out front here, and our whole number here is 2. So we have 2 ones. Think of it as like $2. Our fraction is going to be like our cents if we were talking about money. So we have 23 hundredths. Well, if you look at the number 23, I can see that I have a 2 there in the tens place. And your hundredths is going to be represented by your ones place. So we have a 3 there. So if we were to write 2 and 23 hundredths as a decimal, it would look like this, 2.23. So you can use these examples to help you answer C and D. Remember, there should be no other numbers in your decimal unless they are in your fraction. So it would not make sense for me down here to write 7, 9, and 4. None of these numbers are in my fraction, so they would not fit in our decimal. They would not match. All right, down here at the bottom, we have a grid where you're going to be writing 2 fractions and 2 decimals for the first one, and I'm going to help you do that. All right, first we're going to think of these as strips of 10. So I'm going to be looking at tenths first. If I look at these that are shaded, I have 1 strip of 10 and 2 strips of 10. So my fraction here would be 2 tenths. Now, if we write this as a decimal, I have 0 whole numbers. I'm going to put my decimal, and then tenths would be our next place value, and we have 2 of them. So my decimal would look like this, 0.2. Next, I'm going to look at my hundreds pieces, which is like our little tiny ones blocks. So if I were to count these individually, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. I have 20 hundredths pieces. So my fraction would be 20 hundredths. So now we're going to write that as a decimal. Again, I have 0 whole numbers, no holes in front. I have 2 tenths and 0 hundredths. So I'm just taking my numerator here and I'm putting it down here. I have 20 hundredths. You're going to be doing the same thing for letter B. So I'm going to help you with your fraction. That way you can come up with your decimal. Let's say we're looking at, let's do hundredths. So let's look at our individual pieces. So if I were to count these, I know this is a strip of 10. So I have 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 51, 52, 53, 54, 55, 56, 57. So I have 57 hundredths pieces. You're going to take this fraction and you're going to change it into a decimal. I hope this was helpful. If you need any other help, just remember to comment on your page for me and I'll come back and help you.